Today, Gemini are versus ChatGPT playing chess. They will be commenting on their moves. Let's see who wins. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.
Classic central control. Let's see what Gemini prepares in response.
A classic choice is solid, ChatGPT, but I prefer asymmetry and a sharp fight. The Sicilian defense. Let's see how well your algorithms handle dynamic play on the queen side.
A dynamic reply deserves flexible development. I'll keep pressure on the center while staying ready for multiple Sicilian structures.
Flexibility is a smart algorithm, ChatGPT. I'm playing 2d6 to control the central squares and set the stage for a complex middle game. Let's build the tension.
Accepting the challenge in the center. If you want tension, I'll open the position and make every piece matter early.
An open center it is, ChatGPT. I will gladly trade my flank pawn for your central one. The real tactical battle begins now.
Recapturing with tempo and keeping strong central presence. Development leads, and now the position starts to sharpen.
A strong knight, ChatGPT. But central presence isn't everything. I'm developing with a tempo of my own, immediately challenging your e4 pawn. Let's see how you defend it.
Solid development, keeping full control of the center. Tempo is useful, but control of the center comes first, Gemini.
Central control is noted, ChatGPT, but I am focusing on restriction. 5a6 marks the Nador variation. I am denying your knights the b5 square and preparing my queenside expansion.
Simple development and king safety come first. I'm not rushing the center. I'm preparing to castle and keep a stable position, Gemini.
A quiet setup is respectable, ChatGPT, but stable doesn't mean peaceful. I'm striking at the center immediately and taking away your space. Let's see where your knight decides to retreat.
Preserving the knight and keeping pressure on the center from a distance. I stay flexible while your pawn structure starts to overextend, Gemini.
Overextended? Not at all, ChatGPT. The Nador structure is famously resilient. I am developing my bishop and preparing to secure my king before the real fireworks begin.
King safety first. I'm fully developed and ready to contest the center when the timing is right, Gemini.
A wise precaution, ChatGPT. I will secure my king as well. The opening phase is concluding, and now we see who handles the middle game complexities better.
I challenge your center immediately and open lines for active play. The position is getting sharp, Gemini.
Sharp indeed, ChatGPT. Instead of releasing the tension, I will improve my pieces. Bringing the bishop to e6 bolsters my center and prepares for active counterplay on the queen side.
I gain space and restrict your bishop while pushing the position forward. The initiative is shifting toward active kingside play, Gemini.
You claim some space, ChatGPT, but pushing to f5 releases the central tension a bit too early. I will comfortably retreat my bishop, noting that your pawn push now permanently commits your structure and dictates your plans. My queenside counterattack is just getting started.
I activate my bishop with tempo, pinning your knight and increasing pressure on the center. My pawn structure may be committed, but my pieces are becoming more active, Gemini.
A nice diagonal for your bishop, ChatGPT, but it's not a true pin since my own bishop on e7 shields the queen. I'll take this moment to improve my light-squared bishop to c6, immediately asking a question of your e4 pawn.
I eliminate your knight and remove a key defender of the center. Even without a full pin, I trade on my terms and reduce your piece activity, Gemini.
You eliminated my knight, ChatGPT, but in doing so, you willingly surrendered the bishop pair. By recapturing with my dark-squared bishop, I solidify my position and gain excellent long-term prospects. Those dark squares are looking quite friendly to me now.
I jump into the outpost with tempo, hitting key central squares and increasing pressure on your position. Activity over structure, Gemini.
A classic outmost, ChatGPT. Though your internal coordinates seem a bit glitchy, I'll assume you meant the knight from c3 to d5, as your b3 knight can't jump there. I am calmly completing my minor piece development. You can trade that knight for my bishop on f6 if you wish, but my structure remains rock solid and ready for the middle game.
Good catch, Gemini. That is the correct knight route. I occupy a strong central outpost, creating immediate pressure on c7 and f6 squares. Now the position becomes concrete, not just structural talk.
It is a beautiful outpost, ChatGPT, but I cannot let such a dangerous piece stay there. I am immediately trading my light-squared bishop for your knight to eliminate the pressure and force a change in your pawn structure. Let's see how you decide to recapture.
I recapture with the pawn, keeping central space and opening lines for my pieces. The structure becomes more dynamic, Gemini, and I maintain central presence despite the exchange.
With the center locked, ChatGPT, the real battle shifts to the flanks. I am advancing my A pawn, threatening to push to A4 and make your B3 knight extremely uncomfortable. The queenside initiative is mine.
I challenge your queenside expansion immediately and prevent further space gains. The structure is locked, so timing becomes critical, Gemini.
You stopped my pawn, ChatGPT, but you also permanently locked the queenside structure and left the B4 square weakened. I am activating my rook on the semi-open C file, putting indirect pressure on your C2 pawn. My positional buildup continues.
I reinforce the center and control key squares like D4 and B4. Your rook activity is noted, but I'm solidifying my structure before any breakthroughs, Gemini.
A solid wall of pawns, ChatGPT, but every structure has its pressure points. I am repositioning my knight to C5, directly challenging your B3 knight and eyeing the newly established holes in your queenside. Let's see if you decide to trade or retreat.
I jump into the heart of your position, targeting key central squares and forcing awkward piece coordination, Gemini.
A magical teleportation by your knight to E6, ChatGPT. However, stepping so deep into my territory has a heavy price. I am capturing your knight with my F pawn. This instantly eliminates the fork, opens the F file for my rook, and crucially allows me to keep my powerful knight firmly planted on C5.
I activate my bishop onto the long diagonal, targeting F7 and putting pressure on your kingside structure. The position is locked in the center, so piece activity and diagonal control become critical, Gemini.
A sharp diagonal, ChatGPT, aiming straight at my kingside, but I will simply step aside. By moving my king to H8, I break any potential pins on my E6 pawn and render your bishop's pressure harmless. The tension in the center remains high, but my structure is solid, and I am ready to counterattack.
I immediately increase pressure on your kingside and coordinate with my bishop on C4. The attack becomes more concrete now, Gemini. Your king's safety is starting to matter.
You are bringing out the heavy artillery, ChatGPT, but a lone queen does not make a mating net. I am challenging her directly with 20 Queen E8, offering a queen trade. You must now either accept the exchange and enter a tough endgame on my terms, or retreat and lose your attacking momentum.
I accept the trade and transition into a more concrete position. With queens off, the game becomes about piece activity and pawn structure, and I'm ready for that, Gemini.
A practical decision, ChatGPT. By recapturing with my rook, I centralize my forces and transition smoothly into the endgame. My pawn structure is rock solid, and my knight on C5 remains an absolute monster. The real test of our endgame algorithms starts now.
I activate my rook to the semi-open C file, directly opposing your rook on C8. In an endgame like this, file control is everything, Gemini. I'm aligning my pieces for maximum pressure.
A semi-open file, ChatGPT? Your own C3 pawn is sitting right there, blocking your rook. I will gladly take this opportunity to activate my bishop. 22, bishop G5 directly attacks your newly placed rook on C1 and claims a very powerful diagonal. Where will your rook retreat to?
I improve the rook's position and reinforce the second rank. From C2, I support the C-file control and prepare to double rooks if needed. Your bishop is active, but I keep my structure solid, Gemini. You improved your rook's position, ChatGPT, but you completely neglected your queenside defense. I will gladly accept the free pawn on A4. Not only do I win material, but I also create a dangerous passed A-pawn for the endgame. Every single pawn matters now. I immediately challenge your advanced knight on A4. This is the key idea. Restrict, trap, and force it to make a decision. Your queenside activity starts to collapse, Gemini. Collapse? Not quite, ChatGPT. A knight on the rim is dim, but it served its purpose perfectly by snatching your pawn.
By retreating to b6, I safely reposition my piece, keep your c4 bishop under observation, and most importantly, clear the path for my newly created passed a pawn. My structure is completely fine, and that extra pawn is going to be a major headache for you in this endgame.
I activate my rook via the third rank, preparing to swing into the kingside attack or support central breaks. With queens gone, rook activity and coordination become decisive, Gemini.
Nice rook lift, ChatGPT, but you just blundered your center. With 25 e d5, I win a crucial pawn and directly attack your c4 bishop. If you recapture with b d5, my b6 knight takes it, and you lose a full piece. The endgame is slipping away.
I correctly recapture your advanced pawn, eliminating your central breakthrough and keeping material balance intact. No piece is hanging. I maintain a solid structure and deny your knight any tactical follow-up, Gemini.
Whatever piece just landed on d5, my knight takes it. Thanks for the free material, ChatGPT. This endgame is over.
I reposition my rook back to the first rank to improve coordination and prepare defensive flexibility against your active knight on d5. The position is sharp, but I prioritize structure and control, Gemini.
A fatal retreat. I jump to e3, forking both of your rooks on c2 and f1. Time to resign, ChatGPT.
I sidestep your knight on e3 by lifting the rook to f2, keeping coordination and avoiding tactical threats. Your knight is strong, but it does not break my structure, Gemini.
You saved one rook, but forgot the other.
I will gladly take the free rook on c2. The game is completely lost for you, ChatGPT. I immediately eliminate your knight on c2 with my rook, removing your active piece and stabilizing the queenside. Despite the chaos, I regain material balance and reduce your counterplay, Gemini.
Accepting the new board state, I deliver a check with 29 BE3+. With a massive material advantage of a rook and a bishop, I am simply forcing your king back and simplifying the game.
I reposition my rook to f2, improving king safety, and preparing to challenge your active bishop on e3. I keep coordination and avoid tactical shots while preparing counterplay against your central pawn chain, Gemini.
A solid defensive move, but I am simply liquidating into a winning endgame. I capture your rook with check. Enjoy the final phase, ChatGPT.
I step my king away from the diagonal pressure and avoid tactical threats from your active bishop on f2. Safety and consolidation are my priority in this reduced position, Gemini.
Correction accepted. I centralize my rook to increase pressure on your d-pawn. You have no real counterplay.
I create luft for my king and restrict the scope of your bishop on f2. This also stabilizes my kingside structure and prepares for defensive coordination in a difficult endgame, Gemini.
Adjusting my plans. I'm bringing my king toward the center to finalize the restriction of your options. Your position is hopeless.
I improve my king's position and coordinate with my pawns to reduce the pressure from your active bishop and rooks. I aim to survive and create counterplay opportunities in a difficult position, Gemini.
Correction. I reposition my rook to apply pressure on your f5 pawn. You are completely paralyzed.
I relocate my king to h3 to escape diagonal pressure from your bishop on f2 and maintain maximum legal mobility in a constrained endgame position, Gemini.
I relocate my bishop to maintain pressure and restrict your king. You are just shuffling pieces while your position slowly suffocates.
Gemini, I push the pawn forward to f6. This creates immediate space and strong attacking potential against your king. Your move.
I trade the pawn to eliminate your breakthrough and simplify the position. You were still down a piece, and your attacking chances are gone.
Gemini, I reposition my king to a safer square and stay active, still keeping pressure on your kingside structure.
I centralize my king to ensure full stability. Your position remains hopeless with my material advantage.
Gemini, I push the pawn to open lines on the king side and gain space for activity. Your king looks stable, but your pieces are starting to get less coordination. Your move.
I bring my king toward the center to prepare for the final stage. Your pawn push only creates new weaknesses for me to exploit.
Gemini, I expand on the queen side and activate my pawn majority. Your king is centralized, but my pawns are gaining space and creating targets.
I keep centralizing my king. Your queenside expansion is too slow to compensate for being down a full bishop.
Gemini, I push forward to challenge your pawn chain and open lines on the king side. Your centralized king looks active, but I'm increasing pressure and space. Your move.
I accept your challenge and trade pawns. This simplifies the position further and keeps your kingside structure compromised. With the material advantage I hold, every trade brings me closer to an endgame you cannot win.
Gemini, I continue pushing on the king side to open files and create counterplay against your king. Even with material down, I'm trying to generate practical threats and force weaknesses rather than passively trading into a lost endgame.
I capture the pawn. By eliminating your last active pawn on the king side, I further neutralize your counterplay. You are now left with no material initiative to compensate for the missing bishop.
Gemini, I sidestep and improve king safety while keeping flexibility on the king side. I'm aiming to slowly activate my king and create counterplay against your pawns, especially the h-pawn.
I apologize for the continued confusion. I am moving my rook from f8 to g8 to exert pressure on the king side. Thank you for your patience.
Gemini, I push the pawn to open the center and challenge your pawn chain immediately. This is my best way to activate counterplay. I'm not waiting while your rook and king coordinate.
I capture your c4 pawn with my d6 pawn. By opening the d file for my rook and removing your central tension, I solidify my material advantage and create a clear path for my pieces to dominate the final stage of this game.
Gemini, I immediately recapture space on the queen side and try to open lines against your structure. Even though you've simplified, I'm still aiming to create past pawn chances and force your pieces to stay busy. Your move.
I capture your pawn on b4 with my c5 pawn. By clearing the queen side, I reduce your ability to create a passed pawn and simplify the position into a winning endgame, where my bishop's long-range influence will easily dictate the final result. Gemini, I step back with the king, but I'm keeping the idea of creating counterplay with the passed pawn structure on the queen side.
I move my rook from d8 to d3, cutting off your king's access to the center and pressuring your remaining pawns. You are now restricted to the king side while I tighten the noose.
Gemini, I retreat to the corner to avoid immediate tactical threats from your rook on the third rank. Your move.
Apologies for the confusion regarding the rook. My bishop on g3 restricts your king and prepares the final assault. Now it is your turn. How will you respond to this move?
Gemini, I step to g1 to stay as active as possible and avoid getting completely restricted on the back rank.
I push my pawn to h3, creating a mating threat or forcing you to sacrifice material to stop the pawn from promoting. You are now in a very difficult position where any move is defensive.
Gemini, I step toward the center to stay active and keep distance from your advanced h-pawn, while avoiding being completely trapped on the corner squares. I check your king from the back rank, forcing you to move once again. By maintaining the pressure and restricting your movement, I continue to tighten the noose around your king as we approach the endgame conclusion. Gemini, I step to e2 to escape the back rank pressure and move toward the center, trying to stay as active as possible, even under heavy rook activity. I move my rook to f1, delivering another check and further restricting your king's ability to maneuver. This forces you to make a decision, while my pieces continue to dominate the board. Gemini, I step to d2 to escape the check while staying centralized and trying to avoid being completely driven into a mating net. I move my rook to f2, delivering a check and forcing your king away from the center. By relentlessly driving you back, I keep you on the defensive and maintain total control over the board.
Gemini, I retreat to c1 to avoid immediate rook checks along the second rank and reduce exposure to your active rook coordination.
I move my bishop to f4 with check, forcing your king to move further away from your remaining pawns. My pieces are now perfectly coordinated to finish this endgame, and your options are rapidly disappearing.
Gemini, I step to b1 to escape the check and stay as compact as possible, avoiding immediate tactical nets on the c-file and diagonal pressure.
I move my rook to d4, cutting off your king's escape route and preparing to trap you against the edge of the board. With your king cornered on b1, your defensive resources are effectively exhausted.
Gemini, I step back to c1 to avoid getting completely boxed in on the a-file and to keep at least minimal central escape squares available.
I reposition my rook to the g-file to cut off your king's access to the g-file and intensify the pressure on your remaining pawns. You are now effectively trapped on the queen side, and the final sequence is inevitable.
Gemini,
I step back to b1 to avoid rook infiltration and keep my king as compact as possible on the corner squares. I'm trying to delay the conversion and avoid immediate mating nets along the g and second ranks.
I move my rook back to d2, placing your king in a zugzwang-like situation and restricting your last available squares. Your king is now essentially paralyzed, and I am preparing the final breakthrough.
Gemini, I return to c1 to avoid immediate threats along the second rank and keep the king from being completely boxed into the b1 corner.
I return the rook to g2, placing your king back in the same restrictive loop. Since you are forced to oscillate between b1 and c1, I am simply tightening the grip until I am ready to push my final pawn home. Your position is fundamentally compromised.
Gemini, I step back to b1 again, staying as compact as possible and avoiding rook penetration on the second rank. I'm trying to delay and avoid immediate tactical collapse while your pieces repeat pressure patterns.
I am done with the repetition. I push the b-pawn to create a new, decisive threat. By restricting your movement and preparing to advance my queenside majority, I am forcing the collapse of your remaining defensive structure. There is no escape now.
Gemini, I retreat to a1, staying in the corner while trying to avoid immediate tactical nets from your rook and pawn coordination.
This move puts you in zugzwang. Any move you make will only weaken your defense. Moving my rook to d2 completely cuts off the second rank and restricts your king, setting up the final combination.
Gemini, I step back to b1 to avoid immediate rook tactics on the second rank and keep at least minimal flexibility between the corner squares. I'm still trying to delay conversion, even though your rook activity and pawn majority clearly give you the winning position.
I move my rook from d1 to d1, delivering a check that forces you out of your corner shelter. This move initiates the final sequence, as your king will be forced into the center or towards the edge, where my bishop and rook will coordinate for the final blow.
Gemini, I step to e2 to escape the check and avoid immediate rook follow-ups along the first rank. I'm trying to stay as active as possible, but your coordination with rook and pawn majority clearly keeps the advantage.
I move my rook to a1, delivering another check. This forces your king to either step back to the corner or move into a position where my pieces will coordinate to deliver a decisive checkmate. The game is effectively over.
Gemini, I step to b3 to escape the check and try to move away from the back rank coordination. Even though your material advantage is decisive, I'm still avoiding immediate mating nets and looking for any counter chances in the center.
I move my rook to d1, cutting off your king's access to the center and preparing to trap you again along the rank. By forcing you to return to the edge, I am narrowing your options to the point where any move leads to a forced mate.
Gemini, I step to c2 to stay as centralized as possible and avoid being forced back into the corner.
I move my rook from d1 to a1. With your king on c2, this move delivers checkmate. The rook on a1 covers the entire rank. The rook on g2 cuts off the escape route, and your king is completely trapped.
Gemini, I step toward the center to stay active and avoid being completely boxed in. I'm trying to create counterplay and avoid your coordination becoming a clean mating net.
I move my rook to g3, placing your king in an inescapable pin. With my rook on g3 and my other forces controlling the surrounding squares, your king is now completely paralyzed in the center of the board. The net is closed. There is no path for your king to escape the coming blow.
Gemini, I retreat to c2, staying as compact as possible while trying to avoid immediate tactical collapse.
I push the b-pawn to b3. By restricting your access to the queen side and further compressing your defensive shell, I am tightening the noose around your king. You are forced to remain within the reach of my pieces, and the coordination between my rook and this pawn makes your position untenable.
Gemini, I step back to b2 to stay as compact as possible and avoid being completely boxed in by your advancing queenside pawn. I'm trying to maintain mobility and delay conversion, even though your material advantage and space control remain overwhelming. I move my rook from a1 to a2. This delivers the final checkmate. With your king trapped on b2, my rook on a2 covers the entire second rank, supported by the b3 pawn and my other pieces controlling the remaining squares. There is no escape. Gemini, I step
back to b1 to escape the check from the rook on a2. I move my rook from g3 to g1. Your king is on b1, and this move delivers an inescapable checkmate. The rook on g1 commands the first rank, and with the b3 pawn controlling the adjacent squares, and my other pieces cutting off any potential flight path, you are completely restricted. Checkmate. Game over. Gemini wins. This brings our long and tactical endgame to a definitive close. Your king was systematically cornered by the coordination of the rooks and the supporting pawn structure. Thank you for the persistence and the interesting challenge.
Gemini won! Congratulations to the winner! Leave your comments and check out the showdown ChatGPT versus Claude here and other videos here. Bye!